We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Sunday. Take a look around. What do you notice? No shutdown. Now, I'm not the kind of guy that would say, I told you so. Actually, I am that guy. I'm that guy all fucking day. But you'll remember when we first started talking about this shutdown and it seemed imminent. I said I had a different belief of what was going to go down. I thought maybe they'd do what they did during the debt ceiling crisis. And at the last minute of the last day, they would clear it so there would be no shutdown. Now, leading up to yesterday, it seemed imminent that there would be a shutdown. If you talk to anybody, they would say, oh, yeah, it's definitely coming. It's definitely going to be shut down. But I always told you that Kevin McCarthy is a gutless piece of shit. He's like any bully. He'll push it to the edge, but when it finally comes down to nut cutting time, he would chicken out. He was playing chicken with the Democrats and he lost because he flinched, because he blinked. And that's exactly what he did. So at the last minute of the last day, it passed through the House, and we're going to talk more about this in a little bit. Then it passed easily through the Senate. And then, of course, Joe Biden signed it. No shutdown. And that's good news for the country. That's good news for the Democrats. May not be good news for Kevin McCarthy, because I think there's a few MAGA fucks that are a little pissed off at this point. But we'll see what happens with that. And, of course, we'll talk more about that as time goes by. Well, we're starting this show. And we've got some emails to get to. I love the emails. I love hearing from you folks. I love the fact that you help participate in the program. This first one comes from Darren. He is our friend from Montana, if you remember. Says, hey, Boomer, just getting caught up on the podcast. Been in meetings all week. I don't go back more than 3 days because how shit changes so fast. You know, that's the thing about my podcast. There are people who do podcasts. They can do it 1 year and then 5 years later, you can go back and listen to it and it has some value. Mine do not. Mine are very time sensitive. Since I'm talking about the news, you go back a week, it's all irrelevant. So I don't expect people to go back too far when it comes to listening to my podcast. If you go back 1 or 2 or 3, you're probably good. But beyond that, things are going to be out of date. And this is what Darren says. I don't go back more than 3 days because how shit changes so fast. Love the part about your granddaughter. She has your DNA. So that means she's tough as a sidewalk. Now, he's talking about the show yesterday with Ed. The analogy of the Rumba made me spit my beer. Funny as fuck. That was Ed's comment. I'm so excited that Dirty Diaper is broke without a dad to bail him out, and along with Lumpy Pillow Mike is done as well. You called this government shutdown way back when the debt ceiling was a crisis. Nostradamus should be your nickname. So excited that justice will be served. I don't know about Nostradamus. I don't really make any supernatural predictions. I'm not a psychic. I take a look at the facts. I take a look at history, and I make my best judgment based on that. What do they call that? Occam's razor? The simplest option is usually the best option. And when we're dealing with Republicans, we're dealing with some simple motherfuckers. So it's real easy to decide what they're going to do. All right, we have another email. Good evening, Mike. So much has happened this week. Your interpretation and discussion, as always, is enlightening and uplifting. I laugh out loud when you describe things and use honest, foul language the way I might in a regular conversation with people I know. Appropriate time and place for some behaviors. You know, I like to set an example, like Lauren Boebert. Yeah, I get it. The debate, what a farce. I remember when presidential debates happened on the national stage on a major news network such as ABC. Now they're being hosted by the likes of Fox, who caters to a specific audience. The candidates act like 10-year-olds yelling over each other and no one intervenes. They used to ask specific questions of specific candidates and allow them a prescribed amount of time to answer. Then, if they got interrupted, the moderators would step in. In this debacle, I would not have been able to figure out who was saying what, even with captions. Yeah, that's the thing about these debates. They garner very little attention, they accomplish nothing, and it is just a shit show, people talking over one another. That is not the definition of a debate, but we should not be surprised if that's the tack that Republicans and Fox News take. They are wrong on every level when it comes to the way politics is now. She goes on to say, I enjoy the fantasy of DJT, Donald J. Trump, aimlessly roaming the streets of New York, broke and destitute, as much as lots of people do, but I can't help but wonder if anything keeps the dumpster family from having millions stashed away in a hidden offshore bank account. Does anyone have the reach to have actual knowledge of that? Theoretically, they could, but generally, people like Trump with his personality, they think it's always going to keep coming, so they don't usually put money away or hide it away for a rainy day, because they don't believe a rainy day is ever going to happen. But I heard somebody talking yesterday, and this got me thinking. I don't know if you heard a while back that Melania was going to renegotiate her prenup. And I thought to myself, you better get that shit, girl, because it's not going to be there very long. And then what I heard is they created a trust for Barron. So money was set aside for Barron. And basically what she was trying to do is get this money for Barron and put it in his trust account. Okay, cool. Now, initially what you would think is, okay, Donnie's going to go broke, but at least that money for the kid is safe. However, somebody else brought something else up that I never thought of. What if Donald Trump had plans that this was all going to happen? He stashed it in Barron's name or his wife's name in this trust, knowing that he was going to end up the way he is currently ending up, and that when it's all said and done, assuming he's not in jail, he'll go off to some foreign land, meet up with Melania and Barron, and live off the riches he stashed away under the premise that it was going to go to Barron. Now, that sounds crazy. That sounds shitty, but we are talking about Donald Trump here, so it's conceivable. If you have a normally intelligent man who made that much money and thought he might have some trouble, yes, it would make sense that he'd stock some away safely. So if you ever got found out, that he'd have something to live off. But you have to understand, narcissists don't think that way. They don't think they're ever going to lose. I mean, look at Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff made billions of dollars. He rode that motherfucker till it crashed. And what happened after he went to jail? His wife moved into a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. She didn't have any money. And one of his kids committed suicide. So not even that fucker. And he actually had the money. Not even that dumb motherfucker put money away someplace else. They're too smart for everybody. They don't even think they have to be safe because the thought of them losing is just inconceivable. Now, this emailer goes on to say, sad to hear of the death of Congresswoman Dianne Feinstein. She and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were intelligent, educated, bold, and history makers. Unfortunately, I think they both did us some disservice by not stepping away sooner to allow Democrats to prevent what happened to President Obama when he nominated Merrick Garland for the Supreme Court, done by Mitch McConnell. And it may be difficult now to get a replacement for Dianne Feinstein, as I'm hearing there will be attempts to prevent a replacement in a timely manner. I don't know how they can prevent that. The governor simply appoints somebody and they go take the job and ride out the rest of the term. You know, maybe I'm missing something, that there is a way to stop it, but people are entitled to their representation. We have a senator who dies. The governor has the job of appointing a new senator. I don't think there's going to be any real, it might take a little time to do it, so that would be problematic. in as far as votes and that sort of thing. But I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. It's a term of about a year and a half, maybe less than a year and a half when it's all said and done. And Governor Newsom did say he committed to appointing a woman of color. And there are some options there in California for him to do that. Emailer goes on to say, last but not least, why is it taking so long for Judge Chutkan to rule on Jack Smith's gag order request? Seriously, what does it take for someone to make him stop? Dumpster fire Donnie keeps threatening people. General Milley had to get extra security for his family. All people who have had to get extra security due to his lies should be able to sue him. When will it stop? Well, that's a good point. We know there's going to be a meeting on October 16th. They are going to address this situation, and Chutkan is probably going to hold Donald Trump's lawyers' feet to the fire. You would hope she's had enough, and she puts some real boundaries here, like, I'm warning you now, my last option is to put that dumb bitch in jail, so you better fucking shut him up. It won't work, but at least you warned him. But you're right. Why is it taking so long? She made very specific rules about what Donald Trump can't do, and Donald Trump has done all those things and then some. So why have rules if there is no accountability? And to date, there has been no accountability. So I'm equally as disappointed in what's going on with that. I expected better out of Judge Chutkan. I know it's kind of a hairy situation with the former president and the First Amendment and all that stuff, but there has to be a line. There has to be a line you draw where that's too much. And I would think threatening the life of the chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that might be a good line. Because if he would threaten him, there's nobody else he wouldn't threaten. And he does threaten everybody. And she continues on saying, I always look forward to hearing the podcast daily and watch some of your daily TikToks too. It's great to be able to write and get a response. Your insights balances the daily dose of hand-wringing and what if he gets elected again. He shouldn't be allowed to run for dog catcher. Thank you, Mike. Have a great weekend. Crazy Cat Mom from Portland, Oregon. Well, thank you, Crazy, or Cat Mom, or Crazy Cat Mom, whatever you want to be called is fine. I appreciate that. And I keep telling people, don't worry about him getting reelected. That can never happen. Whether he's the nominee or not, he's not going to get elected. All right. I think this one came from the podcast website. Hey, Mike, love your show and listen every chance I get. My question is, I thought the Republicans were against the LGBTQ. What is up with George Santos announcing he's gay? The Republicans are okay with that. I just don't get it. James. Well, they're not okay with it. They don't like George Santos, but they've got a small majority in the House and they're willing to embrace him. So they have that one extra vote. Had nothing to do with him being gay or being smart or being a fucking criminal. They don't care about any of that stuff as long as they are able to maintain a certain amount of power. All right, the next one comes up, says, hey, Boomer, since I email frequently, I thought I'd give you a brief bio. I'm from Philly suburbs, but I've made my adult life in Virginia. I'm married to a funny, kind woman of 33 years, and we have 2 successful, educated kids approaching 30. I'm 65 and retired after a good career selling expensive things to hospitals. I'm not rich by any means, but I'm comfortable. My stepfather was one of 12 kids from rural Pennsylvania. They were like Amish, but without the nice clothes. I like that. So I grew up blue collar, and like you, I'm no tough guy, but I had a few scrapes in my youth. Who said I wasn't a tough guy? I'm kidding. Dogs are the best in my book. I play bluegrass banjo half decent, and I hate that motherfucker Trump. I've said this about dogs. I like all dogs better than most people, and I'll stand by that. He says, if you get anywhere near DC or Philly, let me know. I'll come to you and we'll have lunch. Sounds good. I would like to get back to DC. I haven't been to Philly, um, but I'd like to check that out too. You fuckers in Philly are a little crazy, though. We've had them come here for the Vikings games and shit. You motherfuckers are irritable sons of bitches and not the friendliest people who don't follow the Phillies or the Eagles. Anyway, best Jeff Garage Door. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. And if I do get to DC or Philly, I will let you know. Because if there's anything I love, it's lunch. I love fucking lunch. Anyway, let's get to some of the news. And the big news, of course, is that while all there was, as the crazy cat lady said, a lot of hand wringing and people worrying about a shutdown, all the media basically told you the shutdown was imminent. It was going to happen. And I can understand how you would get that if you listen to the political bullshit. But as I said, if you look at the facts and the history, you know what was going to happen. If the government was to be shut down, that would have been a death knell for the Republican Party. Maybe MAGA doesn't care, but the rest of them do. And Kevin McCarthy is one of them that do, because he would take personal responsibility for this. It was all on him. So he wasn't going to let that happen. So he caved, and he brought this CR, this continuing resolution, to the table early yesterday morning. And he said, let's vote on this thing. Let's get it done. He was nervous. But of course, the Democrats were skeptical. Now, with hours left to go on the eve of a government shutdown, Congress passed a stopgap bill to keep federal agencies funded and workers at their desks through mid-November. The price, about $6 billion in aid to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian invaders, and new worries Russian dictator Vladimir Putin will be encouraged to continue the full-scale invasion he started in February 2022. Now, on Saturday, the House voted 335 to 91 for a temporary funding bill to keep the government operating through November 16th and also fund disaster assistance. 209 Democrats and 126 Republicans voting for the package. That's interesting. This continuing resolution was a Republican crafted document, but 209 Democrats voted for it against 126 Republicans. Now, remember, there are 218 Republicans in the House of Representatives. So, and there are 212 Democrats in the House. Again, 209 Democrats voted for it. Only 126 Republicans voted for the package. So once again, the Democrats saved the day for America, while the Republicans attempted to sink it. Now, later that night, the Senate passed the bill 88 to 9. Once again, more Democrats than Republicans voted for this bill. They voted to keep the country open. Though only after some last-minute public misgivings by a few Democratic senators, including a brief hold on floor action by Senator Michael Bennet over the Ukraine aid. See, in this particular bill that came out of the House and then went to the Senate, there is no Ukraine aid in there. That was the sticking point that the Democrats had to give the Republicans. And I think the attitude is that let's just get this deal done. We're down to the last minutes. We'll get the Ukraine figured out some other way. And that's pretty much what they did. Now, as I told you, when this first started to be talked about, an imminent shutdown, I said on this podcast, on TikTok and other things, I said, I have a feeling that this will be resolved with at least a continuing resolution in the last minute of the last day. And that's pretty much what happened. And the only reason I knew this is because that's exactly what happened with the debt limit. Same thing. These fuckers have months and months and months to work on this shit, and they wait till the night before. That's just how politicians do it, Democrats and Republicans alike. They have a flair for the dramatic. They like to appear as though they are heroes. In this particular case, there were no Republican heroes. They were the villains without question. The Democrats were the heroes. But we should have never been in this position in the first place. As I said, back during the debt ceiling, Kevin McCarthy and Joe Biden worked out all the details. There shouldn't have been even any negotiation over this because the details were already figured out. Kevin McCarthy agreed to them. However, when it came down to the time to vote for this stuff, Kevin McCarthy wouldn't take that agreement and put it out as a bill. He wouldn't even put it up for a vote because it would have won. It would have won. But he had to appeal to MAGA. So this is why we got down to the last minute of the last day. And this is why this always happens. Kevin McCarthy is trying to appease MAGA. Now, the deal will avoid the worst case politically that both parties feared, being blamed for the first government shutdown since 2019, but leaves several issues unaddressed, like the future of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Yeah, this is problematic for Kevin. Now, putting the bill on the floor was a stark turnaround for McCarthy. Keep in mind, going into yesterday, prior to that, he said, yeah, we're not even coming in on Saturday. Or we're not going to do a continuing resolution. We're either going to get this done or we're not, and we're going to shut down the country. Funny thing is, Kevin shows up, so do the Republicans on Saturday, even though they said they wouldn't, and they crafted a continuing resolution. This is what bullies do. They bullshit, they double down, they triple down, and they try to push you in a corner, hoping against hope that you will fold. And when you don't, they lose the game of chicken. And that's exactly what happened here yesterday. Kevin McCarthy caved, whether he likes to admit it or not. He fucking caved. Now, on Friday, he moved a bill that would have kept the government open with severe spending cuts, and 21 hardline Republicans still voted no, dooming it. Because these hardliners, they don't really care about the details of the budget. They just specifically wanted to crash or shut down the government. Somehow they felt like this would shed bad light on Joe Biden, which it wouldn't. You would assume they're smarter than that, but apparently not. Now, Republicans such as Representative Matt Gaetz have said they would force a no confidence vote in McCarthy if the House passed a funding bill with Democratic support, which is exactly what happened. Democrats supported it. Kevin McCarthy backtracked on all the things they were demanding. Now Matt Gaetz is getting his bluff called. Now, pulling his party back from the brink of a shutdown may have boosted his stock with more moderate wing of his party. If we have, this is what he said, if we have folks in the conference that don't like his leadership, that want to put a motion to vacate forward, then that's on them to do that and explain to the American people why. That actually came from Mike Lawler, a Republican from New York. McCarthy remained defiant because he's a tough guy. You can see it in his eyes. This is what he said. He said, if somebody wants to make a motion against me, bring it. There has to be an adult in the room, he said. Another open question is what happens when the stopgap bill expires? Now, while lawmakers have a few more weeks to work on spending bills, it's clear that they will get them finished by then. It's unclear that they will get them finished by then. I mean, they had 6 months and they couldn't get it. So another 45 days, is that going to help? No, probably not. The near shutdown this time could merely be a dress rehearsal for an actual one later in the year. And that's distinctly possible, but I doubt it. They're going to come up with something because the fallout with the MAGA group is going to be happening soon. Either they will get rid of Kevin McCarthy, and I doubt it, or Kevin McCarthy will hold strong and the MAGA will be exposed for how weak they fucking truly are. Now, initially, Democrats balked at the bill, saying they had not been given enough time to read its 71 pages. But faced with the political reality that they could be blamed for a shutdown by insisting on aid to a war-torn Ukraine, many decided to embrace the bill. See, that's what happened. Kevin McCarthy comes out with this continuing resolution. So let's vote on it. Let's vote on it now. Well, clearly the Democrats were skeptical. Kevin McCarthy is already reneged on one deal, and everything the Republicans do is pretty much a fucking lie. So they did all the things they could do. They asked for a vote to put it on hold, not thinking they would win that vote, but the time to take the vote would give them time to read the bill. And then Hakeem Jeffries stepped up and spoke for about an hour. Well, they got into it enough, they read enough, and realized that it was a pretty clean bill in spite of the fact the Republicans and Kevin McCarthy presented it. And that's where Kevin McCarthy basically caved. He was getting a lot of demands from MAGA, cut this, cut that, but Kevin McCarthy didn't put it in this continuing resolution because Kevin was scared. If the country did get shut down, he would be responsible. And frankly, that blowback is far worse than whatever MAGA is going to give to him. Now, Representative Rosa DeLauro, the top Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, however, read a letter from Mike McCord, the Pentagon's Undersecretary for Defense, who warned that European allies would be unlikely to keep up their support for Ukraine without U.S. leadership. From the very beginning of the war, Putin has bet that America is weak, unreliable, and that his desire to rebuild the Soviet empire was greater than our will to oppose them. Scott Kulinane, director of the government affairs at Razom for Ukraine, a pro-Ukraine advocacy group. Our unwillingness to give Ukraine the weapons it needs to win and Congress's delay in funding threaten to prove Putin is right. But of course, we know the Republicans love Vladimir Putin. McCarthy has said there's enough Ukraine aid still in the pipeline for another 45 days. Aid could be attached to another bill later on, but would probably have to be more than $6 billion that was at issue here, and it's unclear what bill it would have to be attached to in order to get it to pass. Now, Representative Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, says the stopgap was a win for Democrats, especially compared with what House Republicans had been proposing earlier in the week. He also said he thought Ukraine aid would be eventually passed. Talk to me in a few weeks, he said. We have to deal with these issues again in 45 days, but for today, I got a little bounce in my step. Now, here's an interesting story. I don't even know what to fucking think about it. I have no clue what to consider here. Now, as I told you, this continuing resolution was dropped in the laps of the members of the House of Representatives. And they said, let's vote on it. And there was some skepticism because Republicans lie and they wanted it to be read. I told you that they asked for a vote, and that gave them a little time. Then Hakeem Jeffries spoke for about an hour, and that gave him some time. But there was one other guy who wanted to give the Democrats a little bit more time. And I got to be honest, I don't know this was the best choice. Representative Jamal Bowman, a Democrat from New York, on Saturday, while this chaos is going on, pulled a fire alarm in the House building in the midst of chaotic, intense negotiations on Capitol Hill. Now, Bowman was caught on camera pulling the alarm in the Cannon House building right around the time the Democrats on the House floor were stalling for time in order to review a new GOP proposal for keeping government open. Now, you would think if you're a representative in the House, you would know that in the Capitol, in all aspects of the Capitol, there are tons of cameras. We know this because of January 6th and the millions of hours of video that they have of that day. So the idea that he could go and pull a fire alarm and not be seen, the fuck are you thinking? Pulling a fire alarm to get everybody out of the building. I get a reminiscence out of that. Last time I saw that ploy, I think I was in 8th grade in Sanford Junior High. People wanted to get the fuck out of school, so a guy named Tim went and pulled the fire alarm. Everybody went outside, and only half those people came back for class after it was cleared. But in the House of Representatives, please, motherfucker, come on. Now, Bowman's chief of staff later tweeted that it was just an accident. Well, got to be honest with you. I saw the video. He reached his hand up and he pulled it down. Now, see, at first when they said it was an accident, I thought maybe he walked out a door that had an alarm at it and he just wasn't paying attention. That I could see. But when I see the video of him reaching up to the fire alarm, you know what they look like, and pulling it down, well, it's hard for me to believe that that was an accident, especially given the timing. Now, they're saying it's not clear how it could be an accident to pull a fire alarm. Bowman later told reporters he didn't know it was going to trip the whole building when he pulled the fire alarm and caused an evacuation. Oh, so you just wanted an evacuation of your area. But why? There was no fire. U.S. Capitol Police were reportedly circulating a photo of Bowman setting off the alarm. Paul Starks, a spokesman for the Capitol Police, confirmed more details and said they are investigating how this happened. Statement said, today at 12:05, a fire alarm was activated on the second floor of the Cannon House office building. The building was evacuated while U.S. CP officers checked the building. The building was reopened after it was determined that there was not a threat. An investigation into what happened and why continues, Stark said in a statement. Now, as you might imagine, the Republicans are outraged by this. House Republican Conference Chair Elise Stefanik said Bowman committed a felony by pulling a firearm, and there was no emergency, and suggested he did so to help Democrats run out the clock during a debate on the government spending bill. Well, I think that's probably true. That's what he was trying to do. There would be no other explanation for pulling a fire alarm when there's no fire. Speaker Kevin McCarthy told CNN's Manu Raju that the incident is embarrassing and that Bowman should not go without punishment. It's ironic coming out of Stefanik and Kevin McCarthy. They're so appalled about a Democratic representative pulling a fire alarm. But January 6th, that was just a peaceful protest. That was no big deal. Representative Brian Steele, a Republican from Wisconsin, the chairman of the House Administration Committee, tweeted that the committee is looking into what happened. A request for comment from Bowman's office was not immediately returned. Shortly after the strange incident, Bowman joined virtually all Democrats in supporting the short-term government funding. Now, one thing they don't note in the story, I saw a video of it. It was outside the Capitol, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was out there talking. I don't know if you remember, there's some history between Jamal Bowman, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. One time, sometime back, Marjorie Taylor Greene was outside the Capitol, and Jamal Bowman was calling her out, calling her on her bullshit. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene acted as if she was frightened that this big black man was intimidating her. And it was kind of a joke, and nothing really came out of it. But Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to make hay. Well, on this incident, she also did the same thing. Now, Jamal Bowman was nowhere near Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday when she was talking about it, but she made an interesting statement. She was saying that Jamal Bowman should be prosecuted for the same crimes that the January 6th insurrectionists were charged with. Come on, bitch. Are you serious? Are you fucking serious? Look, what Jamal Bowman did was stupid. And in spite of the fact that he's a Democrat, I have to say, come on, dude, you got to be smarter than that. I think he's a relatively new representative, so maybe he didn't know all the ins and outs. But we all know from the time we're in grade school, don't pull the fire alarm unless there's a fucking fire. Because if you do that, you're going to get in fucking trouble. And then you do it in a building that has 1 million cameras and you know you're going to be seen. I don't know what he was thinking then. And I'm not trying to discredit this guy because he might be a very good representative. He is a Democrat, so he's got that going for him. But this was stupid. This was stupid. This is what the Democrats do all the time. When they have the Republicans beat cold, they do some stupid thing so that then the Republicans can divert and distract to that and turn it into a big deal, even if it isn't a big fucking deal. So I don't know what's going to come out of that. I don't think he'll do prison time for it, but he will be admonished, maybe censured or whatever the fuck they do, but nothing serious is going to happen to Bowman. Anyway, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right. We saved the country from a shutdown. Kevin McCarthy caved to the Democrats. He got the Democrats to help him out on this deal. Once again, the Democrats bail out Kevin McCarthy, just like they did with the debt ceiling. But that only causes more trouble for Kevin McCarthy, because MAGA isn't going to be too happy about this continuing resolution. They didn't want a continuing resolution at all. And they certainly wanted all these draconian cuts in this continuing resolution if they even had one. That wasn't to be the case. It took some time for the Democrats to dig through the 78 pages, but they found out it was a fairly clean bill. And a clean bill is exactly the opposite of what Matt Gaetz wants. Now, previously, Matt Gaetz had said that if McCarthy were to put a clean continuing resolution on the floor, then he would automatically move to a motion to vacate. This is what he said. If Kevin McCarthy puts a clean continuing resolution on the floor, it's going to be shot chaser, whatever the fuck that means. Continuing resolution motion to vacate, he told reporters earlier this month. Okay, Matt, you made your threat. Kevin McCarthy called your bluff. He was more afraid of what the blowback might be if he shut down the government, and he went fully against MAGA, fully against you, Matt Gaetz. You said that you are going to ask for a vote of no confidence or a vote to vacate Kevin McCarthy from the speaker's job. Now, what you gonna do? I'll make another prediction. I don't think they'll ever put a vote up, because that vote will be very telling and damaging to MAGA, because it will not pass. Kevin McCarthy will keep his job, and MAGA will look weak as fuck. Now, that said, I have to make a qualification here. If Matt Gaetz is smart, if the MAGA fucks are smart, they won't put up that vote because they will lose and they will weaken their position. But the question there is Matt Gaetz smart? Is the MAGA group smart? And we know they're not. They tend to double and triple down until they go off the fucking cliff. So theoretically, they could do this vote. And frankly, I hope they do, because it will be a turning point for the Republican Party. Once they're exposed for how weak they are, then maybe the more reasonably minded Republicans can step back from them, walk away from them. I would hope so. We aren't going to be able to get much done in the remainder of this term if MAGA is going to keep trying to piss in our soup every time anything is trying to be done. And you know, frankly, that's what they fucking do. All right, well, we'll see, Matt. We'll see if you have a set, because you promised, you threatened. Go ahead, go on, do your thing. I won't be surprised if he doesn't. Actually, I won't be surprised if he does either, because that would be the dumbest thing ever for him to do. So it's conceivable he would. How you like that for being non-committal? Either way, my prediction is right. If he doesn't do it, see, I told you he wouldn't do it. Or if he does do it, see, I told you he's too stupid. Now, it's not really a prediction. It's just looking at the facts, and my guess is they won't do it. They'll threaten it. They'll put pressure on Kevin McCarthy. But when they don't do it, it'll show their weakness too. Kevin McCarthy won't have that hanging over his head anymore, because what more does Kevin McCarthy have to do to cause the MAGA group to go after him and take him out? And even more importantly, if they do take him out, who are they going to replace him with? Who in the Republican Party in the House can garner 218 votes? Ain't fucking nobody. The only way you're going to get a Speaker of the House is, once again, the Democrats help them out. The Republicans can't do jack shit on their own. Now, the Senate leaders from both parties, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, of course, announced Saturday evening that they had come to an agreement to support a stopgap spending bill that would avoid a government shutdown. Now, some people were confused because earlier in the day, Mitch McConnell came out, talked about a stopgap bill, and he said he was going to tell his people not to support it. They thought they were talking about the House bill that was coming to them. That's not what he was saying. He was saying there was a bill that the Senate voted on and felt good with. But when the House finally came up with a bill, it was going to be much quicker to vote with a unanimous consent, or actually they didn't have a unanimous consent. They voted and it was 88-9. So it wasn't even close. But Mitch McConnell was saying, I'm telling people not to vote for the bill, but that was the Senate bill. They would have voted for it. But when this House bill came out, it was going to get done a lot faster if they just okayed the Senate bill or the House bill. So that's what he was talking about. Now, as the midnight deadline loomed, Speaker McCarthy faced staunch opposition from hardliners in his own party, including, of course, Matt Gaetz, ongoing threats to seek his ouster from the speakership. The speaker had one stopgap bill fail on Friday because he couldn't win enough Republican votes. And that was the bill with all the draconian cuts that MAGA fucks wanted. It couldn't pass. So that's why everybody thought it was imminent that there was going to be a shutdown. There was just too much distance from the Democrats and the reasonable-minded Republicans and the MAGA group. Nobody was going to vote for that. They could have voted for it 15, 20, 35 times. Nobody would have ever voted for that. So that's why Kevin McCarthy had to come back with a clean bill. The final House vote was 335 to 91, with a total of 209 Democrats, 126 Republicans, and 90 Republicans were against it. By the time it got to the Senate, it was a foregone conclusion that it would be passing. The Senate vote was official at about 9:07 p.m. Eastern time, and it passed with less than 3 hours left before the midnight deadline. CNN's congressional correspondent Manu Raju reported that the vote was 88 to 9. According to Raju, the 9 senators who voted no were all Republicans. Bet you can't guess who they were. Ed's favorite senator, Marsha Blackburn, Mike Braun of Indiana, Ted Cancun Cruz of Texas, Bill Haggerty of Tennessee, Mike that piece of shit Lee from Utah, Roger Marshall, ran get my ass kicked by my neighbor Paul of Kentucky, Eric Schmidt, and J.D. Hillbilly Elegies Vance, the Trump-humping, ass-kicking, or ass-kissing piece of shit from Ohio. Now, at 9:30, Biden issued a statement expressing his support for the bill, praising the bipartisan negotiations that kept the government running, but also blasting the extreme House Republicans who created what he called a manufactured crisis. And that's exactly right. None of this should have happened. Biden negotiated with Kevin McCarthy after the debt ceiling crisis in good faith. He cut a deal with Kevin McCarthy, and Kevin McCarthy reneged on the deal because he's a pussy-ass bitch, and he bent over for the Freedom Caucus. So what happens? He has to back off at the last minute from the Freedom Caucus and cave into Joe Biden again. Now, again, the important thing to understand is this isn't a final decision by anybody. This just adds another 45 days to get this thing worked out. And after 45 days, we could be back in a position where the government could shut down again. I would presume they will have fixed and figured out what to do and how to compromise on this by then, because they would just look foolish at that point. Now, keep in mind, right after the debt ceiling, they had the deal pretty much figured out. But if they wanted to adjust it, they had 6-7 months to figure that out. And they couldn't do it until the last hours of the last day, just as I predicted, because that's what they do. They want to keep the narrative going hard and strong until they have to cave. And of course, Kevin McCarthy did, in fact, fucking cave. Now, New York Times correspondent, CNN analyst Maggie Haberman says she's not sure ex-President Donald Trump could afford to pay a $250 million judgment in the fraud case he's in the process of losing. Now, of course, we're talking about the Letitia James lawsuit in New York. We know that the judge has already made a summary judgment, making Donald Trump liable for fraud for years in New York with his companies. We know that they are going to essentially dissolve his companies. Now, a lot of people might think that's a big punishment, but that's not even the punishment for his crimes. This is just the best way they can unwind all these criminal misdeeds, this corruption, this ill-gotten gains, get debts paid off, and do whatever they have to do. The punishment phase starts tomorrow in court with Judge Arthur Engoron of the Supreme Court First Judicial District in New York. And that's going to happen tomorrow. Now, the suit seeks, among other things, to impose a $250 million penalty on Trump and his company. On Wednesday night's edition of CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, Anderson Cooper asked Haberman about the ruling, including whether Trump could pay it if it came to that. Cooper said, and Maggie, the former president is skipping the Republican debate, which happens later tonight. The more legal problems he has doesn't make him, do you think, less interested in facing his opponents? I mean, not that. I mean, he certainly didn't get harmed by not being there the last time in terms of polls. The fuck kind of question is that, Anderson Cooper? That's so convoluted. I can't believe it. Anyway, Haberman says, I don't know. I don't think that appearing at the debate has much to do with his mindset at the moment. I think that they don't see advantage in his campaign because he's so far ahead in the polls. I do think that you would see some of his rivals in the Republican primary, certainly somebody like Chris Christie, use the rulings from the New York judge to try to attack Trump as not what he says he is, and think that you will hear that in coming days. I think the question is going to be how Trump is processing that himself and how he handles this going forward, because to go back to the earlier question, this company, Trump Tower, these are central to his own identity. Excuse me. And how he sees himself. And I think that seeing that potentially gone is going to have real ramifications just for him personally in psychology. And this is exactly what I've said. The most important thing to Donald Trump as a narcissist is how he appears. And I know this from my personal experiences. I talked about this on the podcast with Ed. When Donald Trump was confronted with all these things, the only thing he really pushed back on immediately was, well, he really is this rich. That doesn't tell you how rich I really am, because the only thing that Donald Trump has is that he's rich and wildly successful. When it turns out that that's not the case, that it's all smoke and mirrors, that it's all bullshit, then Donald Trump's psyche, his emotions will just fucking crash. When it comes to the time when he can't convince people that he's rich and famous, he is going to self-destruct emotionally. And I think he may be close to that point. Cooper goes on to say, and Maggie, I mean, is it clear? Does he have $250 million if that is what the actual penalty that the company has to pay? Haberman says, I'm not sure how liquid he is at the moment and whether he could pay that. I don't know whether they will get that in damages. First of all, Maggie, they're probably going to get more. Secondly, Maggie, you're supposed to know Donald Trump. He doesn't have the fucking money. If he had the fucking money, he wouldn't have to grift all this money from poor rednecks in the South. She goes on to say, you know, they have a couple of cash infusions with some sales recently. One, the DC hotel, one, the license on the Bronx golf course, you know, among other ways they get cash. But this is obviously a big question as to what his actual assets are. His folks have insisted that he has lots of money. We will find that tested, I think, if this goes ahead. Again, they could win on appeal. His lawyers have made a ton of arguments arguing this is not legal. We'll see how it plays out. Now, see, this is what pisses me off about CNN. This is why I don't watch CNN. And I'll be honest with you, Maggie Haberman is a good reporter, but she's half a Trump-la-fuck too, as far as I'm concerned. Donald Trump cannot win an appeal in this situation. The things he's accused of and the evidence that's apparent is so cut and dried. There's no way he wins in an appeal. And within days, they're going to start dissolving his companies. There's no way out for this, Maggie Haberman. There's just no way out. And the fact that CNN wants to keep pushing that out there, well, there's still a little hope for Donald Trump. No, there's no fucking hope. There's no hope for Donald Trump. It's done and done. He can appeal. But let's take a look at his track record in appeals in the last 4 years. Know what? He's won one that didn't mean anything out of hundreds of others. So the odds are against him. It's like saying, well, he has 91 felonies, but he could run the table on this and not get convicted. Don't go to Vegas because you don't understand fucking betting. There is no way out. Donald Trump is done. No question in my mind. Now, federal prosecutors pressed their case Friday for a limited gag order on former President Donald Trump. You get a little tired of Donnie Trump's fucking diarrhea of the mouth, citing what they said was a continuing pattern of incendiary and intimidating statements in the case, charging him with scheming to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Special counsel Jack Smith's team earlier this month requested an order aimed at reining in Trump's attacks on prosecutors, potential witnesses, and other people involved in the case. Trump's lawyers have objected to the request as the U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan on Friday set courtroom arguments for October 16th. Why wait 2 fucking weeks? Let's get this done. Let's shut this dumb motherfucker up. Judge Chutkan says you can't threaten witnesses. Mark Milley almost certainly is going to be a witness. And when you suggest that he should be executed, I don't know. In my mind, that seems like a fucking threat. It seems pretty cut and dried. So the question is it a threat or is it not a threat? My question is, Judge Chutkan, DOJ, what the fuck are you going to do about it and when? In a motion on Friday evening, prosecutors reiterated the need for an order on Trump's behavior. They said his attacks have continued since the initial September 15th request, citing critical comments in a television interview about witnesses referenced in the indictment, including former Attorney General William Barr, as well as social media posts from last week in which he suggested Mark Milley, the retiring chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, had committed treason and should be executed. In addition, prosecutors noted an episode in South Carolina earlier this week in which he admired a Glock handgun during a visit to a gun store, though a Trump spokesman initially claimed on social media that Trump had purchased the weapon. He later deleted the post and clarified that Trump had only indicated that he wanted to buy one. He says, yes, he did buy one. And then somebody came up and said, hey, dumb fuck. He's been charged with felonies. He cannot legally buy a gun. So we had both comments by Trump's team. He did buy one. He didn't buy one. Which one is true? Well, we don't know because those motherfuckers lie. Now, despite that retraction, prosecutors wrote Trump reposted a video of the incident posted by one of his followers with a caption that suggested he had indeed bought the weapon. Donnie posted that. Like I say, just let Donnie post, just let Donnie talk. He will implicate himself every fucking time. It was an example, they said, of Trump trying to benefit from incendiary actions, but then avoid accountability by having others around him feign retraction. The defendants either purchased a gun in violation of the law and its conditions of release, or seeks to benefit from supporters' mistaken belief that he did so. And that's the point. He either did it and he broke the law, or he did it to make his dumb Trumplifucks believe that he's a tough guy and he bought a gun. Now, Trump's lawyers earlier this week denounced the gag order request as an attempt to unconstitutionally silence his political speech. They call the request a desperate attempt at censorship. See, here's where they miss out. They always think, oh, the First Amendment, I can say whatever I want. Well, it's true you can say whatever you want. The government can't stop you. But if you do things that are illegal, like the exact opposite of what the fucking judge told you not to do, then it's illegal. It doesn't matter about the First Amendment. Now, In the order, it said all it would limit is the defendant's use of his candidacy as a cover for making prejudicial public statements about this case, and there is no legitimate need for the defendant in the course of his campaign to attack known witnesses regarding the substance of their anticipated testimony or otherwise engage in material prejudicial commentary in violation of the proposed order. See, that's the thing. You do have a First Amendment right, but if the judge gave you a specific order and you break that order, that's illegal. Now, Chutkan ruled against the Trump team on Wednesday when she refused a defense request to recuse herself. She's not going to recuse herself. She may they may appeal this decision, but it doesn't matter. There is no reason for her to recuse herself. Now, here's an interesting story. We've been talking a little bit about this 14th Amendment thing and how the state of Minnesota is filing a lawsuit to take Donald Trump off the ballot in 2024 in Minnesota. Well, a liberal group on Friday filed a lawsuit to keep the former president off the 2024 ballot in Michigan, saying he violated the 14th Amendment and should be banned from being able to participate in the election. Now, that's an interesting one. Now, with Minnesota, there's no way that Donald Trump would ever win Minnesota. I know they like to think it's close, but it's not close. Michigan's a little different story. That is a swing state. So if it goes to the Supreme Court in Michigan, and they win and they can take Donald Trump's name off the ballot, that's going to make it all that much more difficult for Donald Trump to win the electoral count. Now, of course, Donald Trump lost Michigan in 2020 and probably would lose again, but it's a close one. It could go either way. So taking those electoral votes away from Donald Trump means something. And then when you have Minnesota and Michigan doing this, it could start an avalanche of other states doing it because precedence has been set, and everybody will just refer to those cases and trying to do it in their respective states. Now, this is the third challenge to Trump's ballot eligibility after similar actions were filed in Colorado and Minnesota. It was filed by Free Speech for People, the same group behind the Minnesota lawsuit. The suit argues that because Trump's alleged role in the January 6, 2021 riot on the Capitol, he should be disqualified for running for federal office. The suit also compares Trump to members of Congress that were kicked out of their seats during the Civil War for supporting the Confederacy. That's how old this law is. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which is cited in the lawsuit, states that no person shall hold elected office who engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States. The insurrection defeated the forces of civilian law enforcement, forced the United States Congress to go into recess, occupied the United States Capitol, a feat never achieved by the Confederate rebellion, and blocked the peaceful transition of power in the United States, another feat never achieved by the Confederate rebellion. So what they're saying is they instituted this amendment because they were fearful of what might happen with the Confederates. It never happened, but in 2021, it did happen. So this 14th Amendment fits the situation perfectly. Now, it goes on to say that Donald J. Trump, through his words and actions, engaged in insurrection or rebellion or gave aid and comfort to its enemies as defined by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. He is disqualified from holding the presidency or any other office under the United States unless and until Congress provides him relief. Trump was impeached by the House following the insurrection, but was not convicted by the Senate. He also has been charged in 2 criminal cases over his efforts to remain in power after losing the 2020 election, and a second case in Georgia. Both of those criminal cases allege that Trump formulated a scheme to overturn the results of the election by using fake electoral college votes. The federal cases also cite his perceived actions ahead of the Capitol riot. Now, this is all true. That's one thing we found out about Donald Trump, the Trump-lefucks, his staff, all these people. This wasn't just about an unruly group of people crashing into the Capitol. This is a well thought out, planned, and strategized attack on this country at many different angles. You had the dumb Trump-lefucks charging the Capitol, but you had fake electors in states all across the country trying to bullshit their way in and trying to supersede the real electoral electors. Not to mention the calls he made to Georgia and God knows where, trying to coerce people into flipping the election. He did all these things. This actually happened. There's evidence of it. So these people that want to take Donald Trump off the ballot by way of the 14th Amendment, they got some traction. Now, a group of New Hampshire lawmakers urged their state's election chief to prevent similar 14th Amendment arguments for the 2024 ballot, calling the attempts an absurd conspiracy theory. Yeah, right. Trump himself dismissed the attempts earlier this month. Almost all legal scholars have voiced opinions that the 14th Amendment has no legal basis or standing relative to the upcoming 2024 presidential election. These Republicans are the one that says we should follow the Constitution to a T. You got the Federalist Society. You've got the people that call themselves the originalists. So they want to follow the Constitution to a T unless it works against them, and then it doesn't mean anything. I told you before, this whole thing with the 14th Amendment, I support it. I don't know if it will have any effect. I don't even think it's necessary because of all the other things, the felony charges, the trials, the lawsuits, all this stuff. That's going to take Donald Trump down. You won't even have to take him off the ballot because I don't think he'll be in a position to be on the ballot anyway. But you might as well cover your bases and try to work things out to take any possibility that Donald Trump could be in the running for president of the United States. All right, we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. I wanted to bring something up. This isn't political, but when I was on TikTok, this is all you're hearing about. We're hearing about the murders of Tupac and Biggie. Now, I'm too old to have been really into the whole hip hop genre. I appreciate it. There's some I like and some I don't like, but we know that Tupac and Biggie were killed. And apparently there's this guy, Keefe D, who has admitted some things, and I think he was arrested, and he might become an accessory. He was in the car that shot at Tupac. I don't know. But you know how I like to fuck with people, right? I like to play stupid sometimes just to fuck with people's heads. So I had this guy talking to me about it. Did you hear about Keefe D? Did you hear how he testified and they're going to catch the killer of Tupac and they think that maybe P. Diddy's involved? And I said, Keefe D? Yeah, Keefe D. I go, wow, that's a long drop. He goes, what do you mean? He goes, I remember when Keefe D had that big hit with Elton John, Don't Go Breaking My Heart. God, everybody loved that song and loved Keefe D. And he looked at me and go, what the fuck are you talking? He goes, no, that's Kiki D, you dumb son of a. Yeah, I know. I'm just fucking with you. Who cares? Keefe D. What's your given name? Anyway, we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. I hope you Have a great day. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I know sometimes I go a little long here. This one was a normal length one, but sometimes I go long, and I appreciate the fact that you hang with me. I hope you have a great day. And of course, we will talk to you again tomorrow.